Anyways, he says he goes to he wasn't with you. Oh, Sunday.
Yeah, I want to go.
All right, as we get settled back in, finish up this last bit on regulations. Starting to get into subpart C of the regs. Subpart C does talk about some of the required equipment that we are needing on board the aircraft. Of course, we have our normal tomato A flames, our flaps, our grab card equipment. One of the things that's overlooked is the emergency gear that's required. A lot of you like to use that tomato A flames and you use the E for ELT. I like to use the E for emergency equipment, ELT being one form of emergency equipment, but flotation gear is another form of emergency equipment. It is going to be required on for hire flights. So make sure you just make a note there. These are for hire when you're beyond power off glide distance from the shoreline. Doesn't matter how many engines you have. If your airplane goes beyond power off the glide distance and it's for hire flight, you need at least an approved flotation gear for each occupant, as well as one pyrotechnic signaling device. Now here at Western, we don't want you flying over any of the Great Lakes in a single engine airplane, the exception of crossing over into the Upper Peninsula across the bridge area. That's fine. But going across Lake Michigan, over to Milwaukee, Green Bay, in the Twin, that's fair game. We do have an overwater bag for you. And it contains these items plus a few more. Okay, let's try a top hat question. You can identify all the required equipment in the list here for a VFR day flight. You're crossing the northern part of Lake Michigan today. In Piper Seminole. All right, for this one, obviously we need an airspeed indicator, need a compass, you need life vests, pyrotechnic signaling device. There's no airspace requirements up there. You're in Echo airspace crossing over the lake. It's a VFR flight, so we don't need any of these other bits there. So this just shows that you do have to know your required equipment list. 91205, make sure you definitely know that one. In that list, it does list anti-collision lights, so they must be turned on day or night unless they interfere with safety. So quite often when we're at the hold line, an aircraft's landing, we turn them off. If you go fly in a cloud at night, turn them off. You do not want those strobe lights reflecting and ruining your night vision in the cloud at night. Supplemental oxygen. These are going to be the low altitude rules. Later in the course, we'll cover high altitude rules. So you should already be familiar with low altitude rules and knowing that if you're below 14,000 feet cabin pressure altitude, but above 12,500 cabin pressure altitude, you need oxygen if you're there for more than 30 minutes. That's the first bit. The second bit, what happens if you go above 14,000 feet? The crew is required to use oxygen at all times. And then one more thing happens at 15,000 feet, that being passengers are provided oxygen. They don't have to use it, you just have to provide it to them. So you should already know those rules there. Let's try a top hat question, see if you understand them. Talking about the crew here, when is the crew required to use oxygen? Make sure you select the best answer here. There might be more than one correct answer, but select the best answer. Oh, interesting. All right, so correct answer is delta. So A is not going to be correct because I don't have to use oxygen if I'm there less than 30 minutes. If I'm there 30 minutes or more, I have to use oxygen. Okay, B is not going to be correct for a very similar reason. C would not be. C is a correct response or a true response, but it's not the best answer because if you go above 15, you still need oxygen for the crew. So the best answer is answer delta. And the FAA is going to give you questions like this. They're going to give you multiple true statements, but one is more true than the other. Mode C transponders, if you have it, you must use it. Unless ATC instructs you to stop squawk or squawk mode A, then you must use it. You already know the airspace rules you need it in, just re-emphasizing that when you're at or above 10,000 MSL, it is needed unless you're within 2,500 feet of the ground. Now we do want to learn these Mode C transponder requirements because when it comes to ADS-B out, anytime we need a Mode C transponder, we need ADS-B out equipment. So I was like, I don't really have to learn too much new stuff with ADS-B. Just, I already know where Mode C is required. I also need ADS-B out in those areas. One additional area for ADS-B out, and that's within 12 nautical miles of the coast along the Gulf of Mexico. And that when you're also at and above 3,000 feet. We don't need Mode C in that area, so that's just the additional area that you need ADS-B out. Oh my gosh, that was a long section. This way you can test if a portable electronic device will interfere with aircraft systems on the ground and have the person operate it and see if you hear any static over the radio, intercom, or if nav flags pop up. So anybody got questions on any of the other many regs we just covered there? Okay, moving into subpart D then, special flight operations. Some more areas that you need to know about. Aerobatic flight, we'll start it off. Areas that we're not allowed to do aerobatic flight in, and that we can't be below 1,500 feet. We can't be within a controlled surface-based airspace. Within the surface Delta, within the surface Charlie, Bravo, even surface Echo. Not within federal airways. So airways go 4 nautical miles either side of the center line. Can't do it below 3 statute miles visibility. And you can't do it over congested or open air assemblies of people. Now you might be thinking, I've been to an air show here at Battle Creek, and they did their aerobatics right above the ground. It is a Class Delta airspace here. We used to have airways going through this area. And obviously we had F-18s or F-16s flying over the crowd at times, performing aerobatics. So how can that be? How can we do that if the regs say we can't? And that's because a waiver was obtained for air show purposes. So that would be the only way that we could get around these limitations. If you fly an experimental aircraft, you are limited in what you can do with that in terms of commercial operations. Right? So first of all, you're not able to fly it over densely populated areas. Experimental, so the FAA doesn't want it coming out of the sky and hurting people. It's going to be a VFR and daytime only. You always notify the tower of your experimental status. You just announce to them experimental and then your call sign. And the only thing you can do for hire is glider towing, as well as the limited flight training in it. That's it. Can't carry passengers for hire or cargo. Can't do any of that. A primary category aircraft also has limitations. Most restrictive is only the pilot owner may operate it. You can't let another pilot fly the aircraft. And there's just absolutely no compensation and no hire operations in primary category aircraft. Maintenance items are next. Obviously, we got our inspections. Oh, question, yes.
Can you slow down for just a second? Thank you.
Do I need to go back for you?
Yes, please.
Is that far enough?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so looking at maintenance now. We do have our inspections. You're already familiar with our list here. You probably regurgitated this dozens of times. You've done it on checks already. So we just want to make sure that you are familiar with everything on that. Keep in mind, all aircraft have an annual inspection requirement. You don't get out of that one. Now, that's certainly possible for Progressive or even a combination of a 100-hour with it. Only IFR aircraft need the VOR check done. And then we have altimeter, static, transponder, as our 24 months. ELT is a 12-month check. Now keep in mind, there's a requirement for battery replacement. This is not an inspection. So please don't tell me on a stage check that you have to test the ELT after 1/2 the battery life. No, it's a battery replacement interval, okay? We often get that on a stage check. You're trying to combine two different things into an inspection, and they are two different critters on that. Like I said, annual is required, all aircraft. It's every 12 calendar months. An annual is a very extensive inspection that could take a week or more, depending on the size of the aircraft. When they have the Seminoles go down for an annual inspection, they're usually down for a week. It's a very good time to get inside that aircraft and look at the systems in there. For example, they pull all the seats out, all the carpet out. They pull the inspection covers off everywhere. You can see every nook and cranny of the airplane. It's a good time to go down there and get to know your Seminole, right? So it's an extensive inspection. It takes a lot of time to do it. They have pages upon pages of checklist items to go through. And then if they find something wrong, it has to be fixed. So therefore, it does cover a 100-hour inspection. So if both annual and 100-hour came due at the same time, you only perform an annual. We know about the 100-hour. It's for hire only. So up to 10 hours can be used to get it to a maintenance base for that inspection. You do subtract the time from the next 100-hour inspection. Now your Cirrus aircraft system that uses the progressive system, it's used in lieu of the annual and the 100-hour, but you must complete it all the phase inspections, or so the complete cycle, within 12 calendar months. All right, so probably familiar with those. Let's try a top hat question here. Got a 100-hour inspection due in 50 hours. An annual inspection was just completed. So when is the next 100-hour inspection due? The airplane went in for an annual inspection. There was a 100-hour due in 50 hours. When is the next 100-hour due? And 100 hours. There we go. That is the correct answer. Most of you got that one. The annual covers a 100-hour, so we just restart the clock again. All right, we kind of hit this one up already. Talk about airworthiness directives. FAR 39.3 is dealing with compliance of the airworthiness directive. It is legally enforceable since it is a regulation now. It applies to your aircraft, to your engines, propellers, and then they say appliances, which is different components. So an example would be the heating system on the Seminole, and some of the Seminoles has an AD requirement. So a couple questions could come out of this on your knowledge test. The other one they could ask you is who's responsible for compliance, and that is the owner/operator. The pilot just verifies that it's been done so they can determine airworthiness, but the owner and the operator have to comply with it and make sure it gets done. When we look at maintenance, only certified mechanics may perform maintenance. It is possible that they could supervise someone else doing it. That's fine. But the regs state only a certified mechanic can perform maintenance. So they have their own license, an airframe license, power plant license. I guess their ratings on it technically. Pilots can perform preventive maintenance. So that's going to be in FAR 43. That's where the list is of preventive maintenance items. So make sure you're familiar with that list there. There's a lot that does not apply to airplanes, but there are things that do apply to you right now. All right, you might get asked a question about a test flight. After maintenance has been done, sometimes it is required before the aircraft is approved for return to service. At least a private pilot has to fly the airplane, no passengers. And then any maintenance records will have to show in the logbook the work that's performed, the dates performed, and the signature. As the signature of the mechanic that's responsible for the overall completion of that maintenance item. All right, top hat question here. True or false? The owner of an airplane is allowed to service the nose strut on an airplane that requires disassembly of the engine cowling. So when we look at preventive maintenance, there are items that are allowed. Anything that requires minor disassembly is allowed, but major disassembly would not be allowed. If you notice, the cowls on your aircraft have Zeus fasteners. They just are quarter turn and they can be easily removed. But you as a pilot wouldn't be able to disassemble a major assembly. Oh, wow, big split there. So the correct answer is yes, you certainly can. Part 43 does allow for servicing of the nose strut. Engine cowls are designed to come off very easily, so a pilot could do that. So the slide we had earlier on airworthiness determination, we're just kind of revisiting it, just for the concept of, all right, there's stuff that has to be done from the logbook perspective and stuff that the pilot has to do. So really, to sum up airworthiness, a pilot has to verify the aircraft logbooks, inspections have been done, and verify through a pre-flight inspection that all the equipment is working. Everything required is there. What we want to look at is what happens when we have an aircraft that is not airworthy. Or I'm sorry, look at something where an aircraft has inoperative equipment, and we want to determine, is that an airworthy aircraft or is that unairworthy? Your examiner is probably going to give you something broken on the airplane for your commercial pilot check ride, and they're going to say, are you airworthy? So the first thing we do is we take a look at whether or not we have minimum equipment list. You know, all of our aircraft do not have that. This critter does allow for anything that's broken to follow the instructions, and we're airworthy. But since we don't have a minimum equipment list, we have to then drop down to, is it required by the FARs 91.205? So you've learned your different lists there for day, night, IFR equipment. Remember, that's only a generic list of equipment that's needed. It's for aircraft in general, right? It's not specific. I remember asking a student on a stage check one day, well, don't you need wheels? And the student's like, oh, yeah. And so they took the Tomato Way Flames acronym and they put a W at the end of it there. I'm like, oh, this is good. All right. Don't we need a windshield too? Student thought about it. Yeah, okay. I'll put another W at the end of Tomato Way Flames. It's like, oh, I can have fun all day with this one there, you know, because 91205 is just the minimum equipment for a generic aircraft. If we look at a specific aircraft, we got to look at what does the manufacturer require through their comprehensive list. And Cirrus does a wonderful job. It lists right there in section 6. This is required for certification. This is optional equipment. This is standard equipment. Very easy to make that determination. And Cirrus does a nice job by giving us a kinds of operation equipment list, a KOL. That's very nice because that says, hey, if it's VFR, Alt 1 is good, but we don't need Alt 2. I like that list. Piper doesn't do a nice job, right? But they still provide similar information. Okay, so if the manufacturer didn't require it, if it's not required by the kinds of operation equipment list, then is it required from an airworthiness directive? And if that's not required, then that equipment is not required at all. And we ask the question, can the flight be operated safely here? So if it can be operated safely, well, then we have the requirement. You are airworthy, but you have to deactivate or remove the equipment. You can deactivate equipment through a circuit breaker or a switch, right? But removal of equipment is only done with the mechanic. So keep that in mind. We still have to placard, we still have to update the logbook on that. If the flight can't be conducted safely or it's required, remember, your airplane's not airworthy. Your airworthiness certificate's not valid anymore. And you have to get that special airworthiness certificate or fix it in the field there. All right, we're going to move into our last section here, and then we'll be done with class. And just take a quick peek at some rules for the NTSB concerning accidents, incidents, and the reporting of them. Biggest thing, definition for accident. It does take place when people board the aircraft with the intention of flight until all people have disembarked. So for the conclusion of the flight. So if we have people, that means passengers or crew, have boarded the flight with boarded the airplane with the intention of flight, and something happens, we have an accident. It doesn't make any difference if the aircraft moved or even started the engines. If the fuel truck runs into the airplane and it catches fire, you have an accident if the crew has boarded it for the purpose of flight. If something happens and there's substantial damage to the aircraft, then that's an accident. We look at, were control surfaces majorly affected? Was the engine majorly affected? Is there any serious injuries? Okay. We look at burns over the body. We look at broken bones. We look at hospitalizations within a certain number of days following whatever happened, or did death occur? Any of those items categorize it as an accident then. Looking at serious injury, right? So hospitalization within 7 days. So some event happened and they're in the hospital. Okay, we now have a serious injury. A major bone fracture. Okay. We're talking about, broken arm, broken leg, broken rib. The regs are specific. your phalanges, fingers, right, toes, your nose, those are not major bones. So those do not count. Internal damage, internal organ damage, internal bleeding, and second, third degree burns. That's substantial damage to anything that affects structural strength, the performance, or the flight characteristics. There's a major repair or replacement of critical parts. That's substantial damage. And these things would then categorize that event as an accident then. Of course, we know an accident is something that's reportable to the nearest NTSB field office, but there's also a list of other incidents that could make for an immediate notification as well. Okay. All right, so in addition, we're looking at any sort of a flight control failure. We're talking ailerons, rudder, elevator. They'll stop working, that's flight control failure. A crew member is not able to perform their duties. They become unconscious or seriously sick. Turbine engine failure with debris. That means parts of the engine came out and have scattered somewhere. In-flight fire. A collision of aircraft. This bottom one here, large multi-engine aircraft, I got ... There's several things with that. Don't care about those at the moment. You're not flying those airplanes. In addition, if you have a propeller blade that separates, even a portion of it, that's immediate notification. Display loss, electronic display loss, 50% or more, not caused by flicker, right, but just part of the display has failed. ACAS resolution. That's a airplane collision avoidance system. Helicopter has a bed, don't care about that. Air carrier lands on a taxiway. You're thinking, how does an air carrier land on a taxiway? It happens. Professional crews get lined up and get the wrong visual clues. Right? Then overdue aircraft. So any of those, they do require notification. Now, what do we mean by notification? And I try to use these terms specifically. Notification is where we pick up a phone and we call. That is notification. That's a phone call. Because the other part is a written report. So when a written report is required, you've got 10 days to do that. And this is how I'm remembering the difference between the two. Notification is always the phone call, but if you hold up your hands, you got 10 fingers. That gives you 10 days to type the report. It's my silly way to remember that, but my 10 fingers means I got 10 days to type with my fingers the report. So there we go. That's it. Questions? Let's see. In primary category aircraft, are you able to use safety pilots? That's, yeah. I don't think you are going to be flying instruments, though, in the primary category aircraft. They are only designed for VFR. But if you need a safety pilot, you would be allowed to have that. Any other verbal questions? All right. Okay, well, since we don't have time for our group activity, I'm going to move it online. It's called the FAR game. It's your choice. It's extra credit. You may participate. I will be putting instructions up on e-learning in a little bit later this morning, and then you'll be able to go there. It will be using the Socrative website. Otherwise, thank you so much. Enjoy. Go make a snowman or snow woman, and have a good day.
I
John?